On this episode of the Take a Step podcast, we are joined by Zach Soder. Zach is an ex-college baseball player. He is a young entrepreneur, recently took the step out and started what's called Soder Capital. It is a private equity, multifamily real estate investing company that he's taken the risk and stepping out and really pursuing a dream of his of being a successful entrepreneur. He's also a brand new girl dad as well, so obviously we relate on plenty of different topics. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I know y'all will as well. So enough of the preface. Let's jump right in. What's going on, and welcome to the Take a Step podcast. I'm your host, Josh Johnston, founder of Take a Step. It's a community that's focused on bringing together like-minded individuals who are all purpose-driven towards taking action to maximize their God-given potential. If you find value in this podcast, please leave a rating and review on whichever platform you're listening. It really helps us to continue to grow this community and change more lives for the better. Feel free to give me a follow on social media at __take a step __, and reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to connect. With that being said, let's dive in. Zach, man, what's going on? Thanks for jumping on the show. Happy to have you on the Take a Step podcast finally.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. It was great to catch up again.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's been a while since we last spoke, and we can dive into it a little bit. But just to start off, tell the people a little bit about, who is Zach Soder?
Yeah, absolutely. I would consider myself a serial entrepreneur at this point, but spent 18 years of my life growing up in Atlanta, very close to you, playing baseball my entire life. Ended up moving to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2016 to chase the dream a little bit further and play college baseball at Belmont Abbey. Ended up graduating after about 3 years and moved myself into recruiting. Spent some time recruiting for some manufacturing and logistics companies, and then moved into the world of finance. So I was able to do some business development and recruiting for some hedge funds and private equity groups across New York, London, Singapore, Hong Kong, and spent 4 years working 18 hours a day, working for someone who I didn't necessarily get along with the best. And about a year ago, decided to leave and start my own venture. So started doing some freelance recruiting on the side, and then about the beginning of this year, ended up launching what we're calling Soder Capital, which is our private equity real estate firm. We go out and acquire multifamily apartment complexes and really help entrepreneurs who have their own businesses outside of real estate, but want to diversify some of their income streams. They want to get into real estate, but don't necessarily know the best ways. They don't have time to answer tenant calls. They don't have time to go and underwrite deals and things like that. So we're able to partner with business owners who want to take advantage of some real estate and invest their capital and get cash flow returns along with some depreciation on it. So my wife recently gave birth to our first daughter about a week ago, which we're very excited about. And that's kind of where we sit now in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, man, love it. I can relate with the newborn, so we'll talk about that a little bit for sure. But let's back up a little bit. I know, when we first connected when we were 15 years old.
Maybe
Playing
14, 15, yeah.
something like that. Yeah. So we played I think 2 years of travel ball together. Going all over the place, mainly all around the Southeast. And I look back on those days with just so many good memories. But I know, so we kind of got disconnected for a little while, and we are obviously keeping up with each other on social media. So you played 3 years at Belmont Abbey, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I redshirted my freshman year and then ended up playing 2 more years after that of actually playing.
Got it.
Dealt with some injuries, so didn't see the field as much as I would have liked. But I got 2 great summers up in upstate New York, so I got to play the whole summer ball and move away from
Nice.
home and live in an apartment with some folks, which was a ton of fun playing. 55 games in 60 days over 2 summers, was a ton of fun and a ton of good experience. But yeah, spent 3 years at Belmont Abbey and then graduated in the summer of 2019.
Yeah, very cool. What'd you like most about your playing days, especially in college and just your experience in playing, going out on your own and having to really make a name for yourself and playing after high school?
Yeah, really just the ability to get away from home and learning how to be a man, how to build relationships with people was the biggest thing. You know, when you play college baseball, you get a national recruiting base, and you had a lot of people who weren't from backgrounds that were similar to mine, especially
Hmm.
when I went up to New York. I was the only person from the South on both of the teams I was in. So I was kind of a fish out of water up there. So really learned how to connect with people who came from very different backgrounds. For me was really the biggest thing that I learned. It was very hard being away from home. Even being 4 hours away was the furthest that I have ever been from home at that time. So it's really learning how to be self-sufficient and connecting with people and building relationships with people that I didn't necessarily grow up with 15 years, and try to forge those relationships and foster relationships from scratch, was really the biggest thing that I had learned through those experiences.
Yeah. Do you still keep up with those guys?
Yeah, I do. Some of my best friends are from college.
Yeah.
Not actually people I played baseball with. Actually, I joined a fraternity. Not that my coaches knew that I was doing that in the time, but we joined a fraternity, and some of my best friends. The godfather of my daughter is a friend I have from college, and someone that's very close. Every single person that was in my wedding, I met in college.
Yep.
I actually didn't have anybody from home in my wedding, so was able to build lifelong relationships moving away from home, was like the huge benefit. Yeah, those are my closest friends now are people that I met in college.
Yeah, we had I always use that example as far as like who was in your wedding. Because like for ours, I had 11 groomsmen, and I think one of them was somebody I knew from high school. My dad, my brother, my wife's two brothers, and then everyone else I played college ball with. So it's just like it's such a great environment that just fosters and like curates relationships based on the kind of person that you want to be. And I
Mhm.
talk all about, and we can kind of dig into it a little bit. I always talk about the value of relationships and like how relationships are some of our greatest assets, because it's like if like a quote that I love is Andy Stanley says, "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." And like using that, I'm always just like, all right, so if there's someone I want to be, if I've identified where I'm trying to get to in life, just put my like who embodies those same character traits, and how can I put myself around them? And I think that's a way to like fast track where you want to get to in life.
Yeah, I agree completely. I quite literally, outside of my family, my brother was in my wedding, and then I quite literally talked to one person I grew up with in high school, and that's like the friend I have. I'm still in my fantasy football group with some high school friends and stuff like that, but don't necessarily touch a lot of them outside of our fantasy football group
Yeah.
chat. But yeah, it's all those friends in college that I met that I was able to build relationships with that are gonna, last in the long run. One of my best friends, Steven, I met in college. He actually lives out in South Dakota now. I talk to him often. His mom became my lawyer, and like now she
Huh.
does all of our legal work. So it's good, like you said, it's who are you surrounding yourself with now, and how can you move yourself to those goals and have a ton of friends I met in college who are very motivated to go and try to, create some independence for themselves. Even Aspen is always asking me questions about how we can try to go and, be an entrepreneur and get away from the corporate life eventually, and
Yep.
really, have conversations that are meaningful and not necessarily just about fantasy football. Like that just doesn't get the gears going for me as fun as it is.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. What else from your playing days? Like, what are some of the I get in like the life you live today? Like, what are some of those values that you still cling to that you learned while playing, especially in college?
Yeah, I think just like hard work and determination is the big thing. Obviously, as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you're kind of always on. And like everyone always told you when you're going into college baseball, like, oh, NCAA rules has 20 hours a week, which is like just not even close. Like if I could get 20 hours, it'd be awesome. Like, so learning how to operate on 4 to 6 hours of sleep when you have class and school and a social life that you want to build. You're 18, 19 years old and want to go out and socialize on top of your school and your baseball. So really learning how to one manage your time, and then two, like sometimes sleep just has to take a back seat, and really making sure that you're able to grind through it and just put your head down and okay, I didn't get a ton of sleep last night, but I have a test tomorrow and we have to get on the road at 3 p.m. to go to a game. So like I need to make sure that I get all of those things done. So really allocating that time and having the discipline to allocate that time was probably a big lesson, especially in college, I was dealing with some injuries. So on top of practice and working out in class, spent a very good amount of time in the training room. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
trying to read, textbooks while I'm getting stem treatment and ice and heat and stuff in the training room, and just really trying to learn how to multitask, which my wife tells me all the time that I'm terrible at multitasking, which I probably am, but I would be even worse if I didn't play college baseball and had
Yeah.
to try to learn how to do some of that stuff. So
Yeah, that's facts. Like for me, I like the hard work and the drive and just the discipline. Those were givens for me for sure. I think a couple other things from my experience was like today I feel like I'm really good in like groupthink situations where you have to collaborate and share opinions, figure out how we can utilize everyone's skills and everybody's strengths and weaknesses to get us to a common mission or get us to a common goal. I love that. I think from a leadership perspective, just because I was I played at Truett for it ended up being 5 years thanks to COVID, but in that role, I feel like I embodied a leadership role on the team, towards the end of my sophomore year. And, being like that comes with the responsibility, being able to, initiate movement, like inspire people to, buy into a program because, every program has its own culture and, it's
mhm.
new for people that are coming in every single year. So how do you, communicate and inspire people to jump on board and go all in with what the culture of that program is? Those are some things that I remember from my days. Like what did when you were at Belmont Abbey, did you feel like there was a unique culture while you were there?
Yeah, I got there my freshman year, and when I was in high school, my senior year, we went 3-22 my senior year of high school, and I
Good
had all
Lord.
three. I was 3-7 on the mound with a 2.08 ERA. I got all three wins, and like
Uh,
there was a 3 game stretch where I gave up 1 run in each of 3 games, and we lost all three. So like we were brutally bad. And then I walk into Belmont Abbey in year one, and all anyone could talk about is we're going to win a national championship this year and walk into a winning culture. And like it got to the point going into my sophomore year that we had to like coaches were like, if I hear the word national championship one more time, like you're running for days. Like we're sick and tired of hearing it because we flamed out at the playoff. But going into a winning culture and having that drive was like a really big thing. Like, oh, this is a lot different that people show up. It was always fun in high school and go mess around with your buddies and all that good stuff. But like showing up to Ballin Abbey and everyone from day one of class was in the weight room throwing long toss, on the mound, whatever it is, and really showing that work ethic. It was a huge winning culture. We finished top five in the country 2 of the 3 years I was there, and then top 25 that third year. Never were able to convert it into even a College World Series appearance, but one, learning how to win, and then two, learning that, you are going to fail in your goals. A lot of those times we were 1 game away from the World Series my sophomore year, I think, and like dealing with that disappointment and trying to go back and like, okay, how do you go through the summer and come back on campus? And even though we had that huge disappointment in the tournament, we were able to come back that next year and still have that drive and that motivation. And like,
Mhm.
you hear that in sales all the time. You're going to get told no 99 times before you get told yes. And like really learning that that's okay. And even when you get let down, that you still have to show up the next day and keep working at it because you are a top tier program and able to come and win. And that was a huge lesson. I quite literally saw my coach in basically tears, after that regional game, and then come back the next year. And he was even more motivated the next year to go win a national championship. So really
Yeah.
learning that winning culture was huge where, in high school, you'd lose a game and everyone's like sitting there partying in the back of the bus, like nothing happened. And like it's nothing ever gets changed. The program is still kind of more or less the same way. And like it's two completely different cultures that I had. So yeah, I really learned how to win and how even when you don't win, you're able to show up the next day and work even harder so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I just thinking about that, like knowing how to overcome the failure while still having a winner's mindset. I think that's important because like I feel like when you were in high school, for example, the the you can become lackadaisical about the work you're putting in, about how to treat if failure is normalized, then it just seemed as okay, then you're gonna handle and respond to failure different than if your expectation is to win, even though you're still gonna fail. For the best hitters 7 out of 10 times, um, you know you're still responding from the perspective of like I still have the confidence. It doesn't matter how many times I'm going to fail, because the way I'm going to respond to that failure is, all right, how can I learn from that and grow?
Yeah, life isn't even really what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you and
Yeah.
how you move forward from that and
Yep.
how can you build on that.
For sure. Love it. I want to talk transition a little bit. I know, I remember from when we were close, but it's really cool to hear from just when we were talking ahead of time how, like, kind of the role faith has played along, in your life. So like I want to hear a little bit about just kind of like the importance of the 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 role faith plays in your life today, and how that kind of, creates or makes you into who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a unique, unique take on faith that I would say I have. I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church and love going to church and all that stuff, but I'm not one that's going to be able to quote scripture to you or do anything like that. But,
Yeah.
in my heart, say prayers to God every day. And I think a lot of that comes down to knowing that everything's going to be okay, that, I can rely on God and know that He's going to take care of me and my family, even when things don't necessarily look great, that continue praying, continue relying on God and knowing that I don't know how to best describe it other than knowing that I always have this like peace about me, knowing that everything is going to be okay because you grow up in that faith environment. And even when it appears that the whole world's falling apart around you, that it's really not, that God's in control at all times. And really relying on Him through your prayer and I would love to be more involved in scripture and be able to quote scripture, but it's just not kind of the, one, how Catholics are or how I will ever be. But I notice a trend that people in my life who are religious tend to be more at peace with things and a little
Yep.
bit calmer about things and not always as easily frazzled, where you see people who don't have close relationship with God or even go to church at all, and they always seem to be either on edge or the slightest thing goes wrong and they explode, or they're always frazzled and things like that. And I kind of just don't have that I have more of a stoic personality, and I do feel like a lot of that is because of my relationship with God, that like even if, I probably have a little bit more road rage than I would like, but even if someone cuts you off in traffic, like it's gonna be okay, like it's not the end of the world. If our plans get changed, it's not the end of the world, and like everything's gonna happen for a reason. I don't think that my wife and I had necessarily planned on me going on an entrepreneurial journey as quickly as I did, but the more we sit and think about it and pray about it, it's like, okay, I think this was kind of what God had pushed us to do. And it was definitely outside of the plans of what we had when we
Yeah.
first got married. But, knowing that God's in control and He's going to take care of it. So really just having that peace of mind and that stoicism about it, I think comes from a lot of the faith.
Yeah. Why do you like? Because you talked about, you just like a lot of the people you knew who had a like where faith played a big role in their lives. Just felt like they were at more peace. Why do you think that is? Because I feel like I see the same thing with so many people that, are very grounded in, their relationship with Christ, and it seems like they're not going to say they're unshakable, but it seems like they can handle the adversity with a lot more peace and serenity than a lot of other people. So, like, what do you think? What do you think that is?
I think a lot of it might have to do with the community. I can always go back home and go to my church and I can go talk to Deacon Leo or Father Neil, or my mom's a youth minister and I can go talk to her. But just knowing that even when everything is crazy, that you always, every Sunday or whenever you need it, you have a community that you can go back and rely on, and people who will give you advice and pray for you if that's all you need, even if it's not actually giving you advice, but knowing that you have a solid community of people who care and love about you at the end of the day. Like it's not even necessarily something I think about very often, but I guess it just comes from always being able to go in and talk to Deacon Leo when I need help. And like going and speaking to those people is great. So maybe it is just the community-based aspect of it that you're able to take advantage of and know that there's people who will always care and love about you, and you can always go and tap into those people through prayer or conversation or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
That's the biggest value that you get out of the church, especially nowadays, I think, is community and making sure you're surrounding yourself with one, good people, and then two, people who care about you.
yeah. Community's huge. Just in like going back to what we were just talking about the value of relationships, like having a sense of community around you, whether you're going through good times or bad times. It's just the accelerator to get you back to level ground.
Hmm.
And for me, like there are people that can quote scripture way better than me, but one of my favorite verses in relating to peace is John 16:33. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, "For I tell you these things so that in me you will have no. For I tell you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will experience trials and tribulations, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And I look at that verse and I'm like, all right, like it's not an if, but when we experience the hard times and adversity, because Jesus tells us point blank, you will experience trials and tribulations, but the key to peace is staying rooted in Christ. And that's
Yeah.
kind of where I, what I cling to and whatever's going on. I know, God told or Jesus told us this was going to happen. So therefore, I'm gonna cling to Him in these situations, and it also Romans 8:28, a verse that I also love. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the verse right now? It is for all God works all things together according to those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So like bringing those two verses together, it's Jesus is the key to peace, and God's gonna work all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So it's just like though that gives me the assurance that like no matter what's going on, cling to Jesus, things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's where I come from.
I agree. And you see like leading up to the crucifixion, Jesus goes through 40 days in the desert, and like almost at that time the disciples were a mess, and he is still his stoic self, and
Yep.
no, he knows he's about to be led to his death, and he is still calm and stoic and going up the hill to the cross, and like his mom and Mary Magdalene are, weeping and crying, and he's carrying the cross up, and still, the strength that you have. So even when you are being quite literally led to your death, that he's the most stoic person that you could have, and try to resemble that as much as you can, even when every other person that's close to you is quite literally melting down at the seams, that it's going to be okay. And like he knew that he was going to be resurrected, and like that's going to be, we're able to be resurrected when we do die and pass and go to heaven. And that's kind of what it is, that no matter what happens in this life, that we have that to look forward to, and entering the gates of heaven and going there is a huge, aspect, and something to lean on for sure.
Yeah. Love it. Um, let's talk a little bit about Soder Capital. And because I want to hear all about how that came to be. But before we get to that point, I want to take a step back a little bit. You talked about when you kind of started off your career working 18-hour days for about 4 years, I think you said. So like I want to hear a little bit about you know the evolution that came to allow you to get that gave you the skills to be able to step out on your own, start your own thing, and kind of the what you learned, the mental. I'm sure there was a lot of the same hard work and drive and work ethic that you were talking about in your college days that came into play when you were kind of battling and grinding out those long days. So tell me a little bit about the beginning of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So really what had kind of drove me to this point was, I did a year of recruiting for manufacturing, which maybe helped a little bit, but really when you step into the world of finance and talking to these professionals. So I worked for recruiting for a hedge fund called Exodus Point Capital, and spent a lot of time recruiting professionals, a lot of investment managers for them, and did a really good job of, one, in order to place people there, you have to have a very solid understanding of what their investment strategy is. We take huge fees to place people there. So talking to hedge fund managers, and not only what is your strategy, but how do you come to that conclusion? How do you get those returns? So spent a lot of time vetting a lot of hedge fund managers and talking to people about it, and really came to the conclusion that you don't necessarily have to take big home run swings to get gains. Exodus Point, they taught their PMs, if you could get 1/4% a week, at the end of the year, you look up, you're 13.5% up, and they managed 14 billion at the time. So it was what, almost $2 billion that you're
Yeah.
getting. And that's like a small gain that you can make on that 1/4% a week, and you
Hmm.
look up and you're up almost $2 billion on the year. So not necessarily taking huge swings, but I was able to really talk and vet through a lot of these people. And then Exodus Point was up in New York, but I did a lot of work with them in London and Singapore as well. So I was working Asia hours, working London hours, and staying up until 10 p.m., going to bed for a couple hours, and then waking up at 4 a.m. to go and do some cold calls again into Asia was always fun. But really got to about year year three doing that and was like, okay, I don't necessarily know if I want to recruit forever, and actually thought I was going to go and start rolling up small businesses. Obviously, you see a lot of these boomers that are retiring and their businesses a lot of times just go by the wayside because their kids don't want it, they're not able to sell it, and it just like ends up folding up. So thought I was going to go and leave and do that and take a lot of the lessons I learned from Wall Street on how to manage a portfolio and apply that to running small businesses. But ended up just getting attracted to real estate for one way or another. I don't necessarily know why. I think a lot of it had to do with the taxes, honestly. I'm like, even if you go and buy these businesses, you are still dealt with a 35 to 40% tax bill at the end of the year. And how do you go and reduce that? And the best way to do that is through some depreciation in real estate. So ended up starting networking, ended up starting like my buddy, one of my friends, Teddy, approached me about some off-market real estate stuff that I ended up getting into, and then ended up getting into a mastermind and started learning about the real estate game, like in whole, especially the multifamily, and really
Yep.
just fell in love with it. So around the same time I got into that mastermind, had a friend of mine from home whose dad, he coached me in baseball forever, and he had been retired for about 5 years from U.S. banks and was like, dude, if I have to sit in front of the computer and keep trading stocks, like I'm just getting bored. You can only do that for so long. And he's like, I kind of want to get into real estate and know that, I need to get into it, but I don't want to change a toilet. And I'm like, okay, so how can we go and find it? And then I came across real estate syndication. And through this mastermind, really learned a lot about real estate. And then finally ended up meeting this guy Marvin, who's down in South Georgia. He lives in Tifton, and he owns and operates 2,500 apartment units in Georgia. And he agreed to come on as a partner with us. And really, once again, we talked about our community. Once I surrounded myself with a good team that I felt comfortable with, Darren's a financial guy. He spent many years in asset-based lending, and then Marvin is an owner operator of multifamily apartments. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this now, and really jumped into the multifamily space after I felt like I had, built not necessarily the foundation of I think I know how to manage a portfolio based on talking to all these hedge fund professionals, but even if I think I do, I'm not gonna, no one's gonna trust me to manage their money if I don't have a team around me. And then I don't trust myself to do it. If I don't have people that are smarter than me around me, then I don't necessarily feel comfortable jumping into something. So once I brought those two partners together, I was kind of able to say, all right, we're going to go do this and start this private equity firm and go start buying apartments is really kind of how it came together. So
Mm.
I know it's kind of a long way to get there, but really
Yeah.
just a you know, a bunch of coincidences is what I was telling someone a while ago. I didn't necessarily think or know that I was going to get into real estate when I left and went on my own. I just knew I had to get out of that corporate world. I was still doing some recruiting on the side, and then the real estate thing kind of fell into my lap through a friend and then a couple other, business partners who came along the way as well.
Yeah. No, I resonate a lot with the feeling like it's time to exit the corporate world as fast as humanly possible because like that was my track record was leading me to as well. And for me, kind of similar to you, like I didn't know what that next step was. The next step ended up for me starting this podcast and just seeing what happened, and that led to what I'm doing now in the coaching in the life and business coaching space, which brings so much fulfillment. And I partnered with a small business that had been around for years and years and years, but that's just kind of where it led me, and the fulfillment that came with that was so like it was so worth it. But for you, not knowing what that next step was and then ending up with real estate, was that did you like when you found out that this was the path for you? Was it like solidify? Like, was there like a single moment where you were like, "This is my path," or was it just kind of like a sequence of events?
Yeah, I really can think back to it. So that mastermind I got into, it's a guy, Gabe Bowling, and I think everyone kind of knows who Grant Cardone is. And
Yep.
Gabe actually worked for Grant for 3 years, raised 100 million for Grant. And I was listening to Gabe on a podcast, obviously, as most of us do, YouTube and podcasts. And I listened to Gabe on a podcast. He's a year older than me, and obviously, as you know, there's not a ton of people our age who I would say get it. And you could
Yeah.
just tell from the moment that I was listening to Gabe on that podcast that I was like, oh, this kid gets it. And then he
Yeah.
was talking about his mastermind, and that's kind of when it clicked. I had always seen Grant Cardone pop up on my thing. I'm like, dude, I'm sick and tired of you posting your private jet. Like, it's just unbelievably annoying. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's just not like, I would love to get into real estate, but if everyone in real estate's like that, that's something I want nothing to do with because
Yeah.
as great as like the money is, like, I'm not necessarily in it for the money. I'm in it for creating time with my family. And
Yep.
that's kind of what Gabe was talking about, and then really dove in at that point. I was like, okay, this is kind of what I need to do. Like, it's not this one way to do real estate. So yeah, it was really coming across Gabe on quite literally a podcast and listening to it and dove head first into it. Was like, this is what I need to do. And I, when I left and was doing some freelance recruiting, I went from working 18 hours a day to probably like 4 or 5. I was playing golf like 3 or 4 times a week and just like not really interested in work at all. And then like I got into that real estate and it just clicked again. And I started going back to like 16, 18-hour days. And I was like, just something I fell in love with
Yeah.
again and kind of knew.
You find that like I call it like the flow state of feeling like you're getting back into the grind, but it's like it doesn't feel like the same grind as like trying to get through the the agonizing days. It's the grind of like I'm like falling into this flow state where it doesn't even feel like work. I'm just passionate about it and I want to keep going.
Yeah, I was like quite literally on Gabe's training platform until like 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes like, oh my God, I gotta go to bed, dude. Like I cannot stay up and watch these videos any longer. And like went through his whole training platform in like a week and a half. And like it's supposed to take a month and just like ended up just absolutely falling in love with it and knew that it was what I was supposed to do. I always understood real estate and kind of how it worked and was always more or less interested in it, I guess. But really, kind of just falling in love with it again. And once I started realizing that it was 2, 3 in the morning again, and I hadn't put it down yet, I was like, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
this is really what I need to do.
So was that training platform part of that mastermind group or was it a separate program?
No, yeah, it was part of that group. We have networking twice a week, so he has it set up really well where there's probably 250 people in it now, and we have networking on Tuesday for half an hour, and then he does what he calls class, and we'll do like a white room, like whiteboard class, and he'll teach something about real estate, whether it's actual underwriting or raising capital or apartment operations or something along those lines. So that's every Tuesday, and then every Wednesday there is a deal. So there's 2 deal reviews. So we'll review live deals. If I have a deal, I'm actually pitching it next week to them where I'm actively fundraising for a deal right now and I'm able to go pitch it to the group. There's a bunch of investors in the group, so we'll be able to raise some capital through that. And all of that is recorded. So that's really what had attracted me to that group is he had been doing this since late 2022 and he had recorded every single one of these things twice a week for the last 2 years. And I was able to go back and like kind of learn all of that. So yeah, it's part of that mastermind that I'm in.
Got it. So this has been like the whole real estate thing has been put into action for what, not even a year?
Yeah, not even a year. Yeah, it was probably August of last year. I went off on my own, and yeah, I've probably been in real estate since like March or so is kind of when it really took off.
So what's crazy to me is like that, like it seems like you're so like just hearing you communicate, it sounds like you've taken these huge steps to get to where you're at now in such a small period of time, and this relates perfect to one of the insights that I always talk about is just like it sounds so daunting, and I'm sure it did for you when like it was like first you were first thinking about this being a viable option of like is this something I actually want to pursue? How much like I can only imagine how much I'm gonna have to learn. How am I actually going to apply what I learn in a way that gives me credibility when talking with investors that are actually worth my while. So like something I always talk about is like with all of that, there's a level of fear that will keep people from ever taking action in the first place, right? So
Mhm.
it's been half a year for you, and you've come to this to this point where you're starting to be able to pitch for you know you know multiple 7-figure investor deals. So what were the steps that you took that gave you the confidence, that gave you the material to put you in the position you're at right now, that where you're doing some of these things?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing is I've always been very aware of what I don't know. And like in
Yeah.
this world, especially real estate, like people love to talk, people love to share information, and it's like this big terrifying thing. And I'm sure it's this way with pretty much any other business owner. Is like, oh my God, I can't do this because one, I don't know what I'm doing, and two, if I start asking questions, people are going to make fun of you. And it's quite literally the opposite. If you approach people and try to be humble and ask questions and have this hunger to learn, people share information. Like I didn't come to any of these conclusions on my own. I'm not reinventing the wheel by any means. Like quite literally everything that I'm saying and will say has come from me talking to other people and learning from other people. So really just, it's a very fearful thing that you don't know what you're getting into, but just know that there are tons of people. I mean, there's thousands of people in this business who you can ask questions of and who will answer those questions. So, just picking up the phone and calling and asking people
Mm,
and going to networking events and trying to learn as much as you possibly can. People love to share information in this space because there's 100,000 ways to get screwed in this industry, and other people have seen them. And like just asking questions about, not even necessarily what's gone right in your business, but what's gone wrong. And
yeah.
when you can connect with people who want to share what's gone wrong, then you're really in good shape. And that's really what had attracted me to Gabe and his group is like that's what he's very upfront and honest about is when things go wrong. Like he just closed a deal and he had to end up bringing on another partner to be the loan sponsor because of one thing or another. And that's something that most people won't share. There's the dirty little secret about Grant is he had to refinance his biggest deal in Fort Lauderdale the last 2 years, and he may lose the property at the end of the year. And nobody knows that he doesn't talk about it on his social media. He tries to hide all that stuff. And that's like people you don't want to surround yourself with. It's like, okay, you want to talk to the guy who lost his first deal. Like I just got into another mastermind this week actually with this guy Josh Ferrari, and he like quite literally led the story of like my first real estate deal. I lost $70,000, and this is how I did it. And like that's those are the kind of people. These are the kind of people you want to surround yourself with because they teach you what not to do. And once you start asking questions and surrounding yourself, once again, like a community and a group of people that you're surrounding yourself with that can teach you not just the wins, but teach you the losses is really how you'll get ahead in this business. And when you do find those people, they will share those stories. I can promise you that much.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I just finished a book. Do you know the name Tom Bell? He's a
I've
lo-
heard it.
he's in Atlanta. He's in Atlanta. I mean he's not just in Atlanta, but he ended up settling down in Atlanta. But he has a book that he wrote, the crazy part about his story, he was a CEO for I think 7 different Fortune 500 companies, almost all of them in different industries. And the crazy part about that is like he was obviously great at building teams, great with leading, great with networking, but the one theme that continued to come up in every single business is when people would talk about him, they talked about how great of a listener he was, how great he was at asking questions, and how he never tried to seem like he had everything figured out. So like the combination of that, like what you're talking about, is like even if you feel intimidated, if you're in a group of people that seem to be, highly successful and doing huge things, if you come into the room and try to act like you have everything figured out, then eventually you're gonna be you're either gonna get figured out or you're
Mhm.
just going to seem like everyone else, which isn't going to help you stand out. But when you actually ask questions, people who have that information are just looking for reasons to share and looking for ways to, give their vast knowledge to anybody who asks. So, like, why not soak up that information when you're in those rooms instead of trying to act like you have everything figured out?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And just like be willing to ask questions. Like I would consider myself a lifelong learner. I just want to
Yeah,
know things. I don't care if it's about space or rocks or like whatever it may be, train. Like it's just everything I want to know. I want to know everything about everything. And like I have no shame about asking people questions and just knowing that I will never know everything. And there's always going to be someone who knows more in the space than me. And like I'm completely comfortable with that because I just love learning. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to want to keep learning. Like you were talking about earlier, you just got your MBA. Like even though you have a master's degree in whatever it is, like you will never stop learning even
no,
after that. Like there's always another stage to go take, whether it's reading a book or learning something new. So really, as an entrepreneur, never never letting that drive to learn things, even if
Yep.
it doesn't have anything to do with your business, just wanting to know things is kind of what drives a lot of
Yeah.
that, I would say.
And even in a way that goes against the status quo. Like for what I mean by that is like the notion of going to high school, going to get your 4 year degree, and then if you want any higher learning, go and get your MBA or get some sort of master's degree. If you want to keep going, get your doctorate. But that's been like the quote unquote right way to do it for, really our parents' generation, the people that came before us, because that was the only thing that was out there. But now you have all these, quote unquote gurus. I hate that term, but the coaches in the space. But for me, it's the people that have done it and are creating ways to share the knowledge that they've learned for years and years and years in more privatized style education through
Yeah.
courses, through mastermind groups, through coaching programs, and like the those give you access to real world experience when rather than the curriculum standardized testing base that you get from higher education.
Yeah, which like I hated high school because it felt like a lot of high school was just like you learned it and there wasn't a lot of why behind it. You just learned five plus
Exactly.
five equals 10. And like once I got to Belmont Abbey, it's a liberal arts school and like every class, like there was never a clear answer. Like you could get an A on the test and the other person could get an A on a test and you would have two completely different answers because we had a lot of philosophy and theology and like
Yep.
constitutional law classes and stuff like that. And really that was what piqued my interest in wanting to learn and wanting to know the why. Like you don't even necessarily know, like I'm not even going to get information just so I can regurgitate it. Like I want to understand the mechanics behind it. And how did you get to that conclusion? And wanting to know the real drive behind that answer and not just being able to regurgitate five plus five equals 10. Like we have ChatGPT now. We can learn like any time
Yeah.
you need to know a fact, you just get online and Google the fact. Like the facts kind of don't even matter at this point. You really need to be able to know how to think and how to come up with conclusions on your own that are derived from outside of just the standard things that we learned at school.
Yeah, for sure. Um, you talked a lot about how aware you are about what you don't know, and being willing to talk about what's gone wrong instead of what's gone right. So for, like, since you stepped out as the serial entrepreneur, going out on your own now, being the person who's kind of spearheading Soder Capital, what are some of the challenges that and adversity that you're either currently trying to navigate, or just what are some of those things that you're walking through that are just obstacles in the way of getting to where you want to go?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just trying to step into, a whole new world that is, trying to focus more on, a lot of the investors that we have to bring in. You have to be, for this deal we're raising for, you have to be an accredited investor. So you have to have a net worth of $1 million or make more than $300,000 a year. And I don't know a ton of people in my circle that have that kind of money or even
Mm,
have family and friends that have that kind of money. So really trying to keep broadening that circle is the biggest thing and be able to speak the language of what some of these investors want. I've been blessed to be surrounded by, very successful people. My dad ran a small business and stuff like that, but it still wasn't at that like upper echelon of what I would call true like high net worth individuals. So
yeah.
really trying to connect with people and not necessarily just connect with them, but learn what they want. The sophisticated investor is a lot different than the standard investor who's just investing in the stock market and fine with taking
Yep.
their 8 to 10% a year. There's a lot of things outside of it. So, it's not even necessarily about just getting their capital because the deal's good, but really understanding their investment philosophy and how you can build wealth that's going to go for multiple generations and really trying to connect with those people. It's a little bit of a different conversation and trying to navigate through that and find those people to connect with has probably been, the hardest challenge in converting leads into investors has been difficult. Really just trying to speak that language and make sure that they feel comfortable with me in managing some of their capital and managing their money and projects. So that's like the hardest thing is really starting to take that step into that next level and connecting with people. It's not something I'm comfortable with. I would much rather be in a hunting cabin in South Carolina, like shooting the shit with my boys, but like trying
Yeah.
to sit, and have buttoned up conversations with people I've done and I will continue to do. And you've spent time recruiting Wall Street professionals, but at the end of the day, like I'd much rather be, sitting on a floating cabin down in the swamp in South Carolina and
Yeah.
like really trying to get outside of that and make sure that people could take me serious and I could still want to do those things, but making sure those people take me serious at the same time.
And are you given, like, through these groups that you're in, are you given good strategies and tactics to go about that, or is it just kind of like, are you having to figure that out on your own?
A mix of both, they'll
Yeah.
give you strategies and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, every person's different and every strategy is a little bit different. So I've gotten a lot of good things and always talking and asking questions on it. Hopefully this new mastermind I joined this week with the guy Josh, funny enough, Josh Ferrari, and he
Where's he out
hopefully
of?
he's out of Mobile, Alabama.
Okay.
And he actually lives in Florida now, but grew up in Alabama. But he does like this 30-day capital raising challenge, which I'm going to start doing next week, I think. So I think that one will help with some of the more of the capital raising. So yeah, there are, strategies and stuff you can give, but at the end of the day, like I don't want to just copy and paste someone's strategy onto something. I want to be my own man and do my own thing as well. So trying to apply, some of those strategies that they have and talk about it and apply it to myself. But yeah, they do a good, I would say not great job about it just because it's so unique and every person's different and every investor's different. Like even your person who's worth $50 million, you have two people who are worth $50 million and they will want completely different things out of their investments because of where they're at in their life. So it's kind of hard to just take a blanket blueprint on capital raising and apply it to a bunch of different things.
Yeah, it's so cool because they're like the whole industry goes off in so many different directions. Because like I listen to a lot. Do you know who Ryan Pineda is?
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of Ryan Pineda stuff, and I know he's more in like the wholesale residential real estate investing category. But I listen to, I mean, majority of the content I absorb from him is all in, entrepreneurship, content creation, marketing, that whole world. But, someone that I've connected him with is Brandon Turner, who I'm sure you're familiar with. He
Yep.
started Bigger Pockets was one of his, and then so I lead a small group at our church, and one of my co-leaders is the VP of investors for Open Door Capital, which is his their real estate investment company. So I hear a lot about it. It's just such a unique industry. In just kind of the spontaneousness. It seems so so systematized, like there's the systems and processes, but it's so like left open to, it's a very entrepreneurial driven space where it's just like if you find a way to work a deal, figure out how to get it done. So it seems like it's
Yeah.
very in line with your mindset right now.
Yeah, exactly. And the goal down the road is going to be to build a more systematized process and,
Yeah.
hopefully bring on a VP of investor relations and an asset manager and all that good stuff. So I don't necessarily have to be as hands-on, but it's just me right now. So I'm still trying to figure it out and build those
Yeah.
processes and things like that. So I know a lot of those guys are a lot better than I am at having the systems and the processes. So there are, scripts and things like that you could go, but like if someone hands me a sales script, like I just think it's full of crap. Like if
Yeah.
anyone's operating on a sales script, you're just not going to win at all.
For sure. And like what you just said, like a lot of those guys, are better than you. The crazy thing about it, and it's so apparent, and like you look around the world today, is that is what keeps people from starting at the very beginning. Like so many people like see all these other people in whatever space they want to move into, and they think it's saturated because they see other people that are successful, and they're like, all right, I see where I am, I see where they're at. There's this massive gap that seems like it's too big to climb. But it's the people that say, you know what, they had their success. They've proven that it's, what's possible in the industry. Now it's time to, write my own story and just take action, because like if you never take action, there's no way to produce momentum. You can't pivot from action that was never taken. So if you just act and figure out things along the way, you'll quickly learn what doesn't work. I promise you that. But
Yep.
once you do that, kind of like what we were talking about with failure earlier, you're kind of how your mindset is. If you have that winning mindset, it's the nature of, all right, failure is a good thing because it teaches me what I shouldn't do next time. So now I can make the adjustment and continue to go. But none of that is possible unless you just say, hey, screw it, I'm going to take action and try to at least put myself on this path that I want to pursue.
Yeah, exactly. And just not being afraid to like lean on people. And like it sucks. Like equity is always more expensive than debt. But in this space, especially in real estate, like in order to get a loan, it's a $6 million loan we're taking on.
Yeah.
In order to get approved for that loan, you have to have the net worth of $6 million, and you have to have liquidity on your balance sheet in order to pay that if, that deal went sideways. And obviously I don't have that. So I had to give up equity on this first deal to Marvin. I had to give up equity to someone else. And like, if I need to, if I'm going to fall short on a capital raise, I'll bring in a capital raiser and give up some more equity. And like, yeah, that sucks. It might hurt my ego a little bit, but if it means I get the deal closed and I can do the next one better, then I'm absolutely willing to do it. So always being willing to, bring on partners and give up some stuff if you necessarily have to. Like, obviously, you don't want to give up a ton. Like, I will never give up any capital in actual Soder Capital. It's 50% mine and 50% my wife's, and it will always be that way. But each fund that we have set up, if I need to bring on a partner to close off the fund, then I will absolutely do it. I have no shame in doing that. Like, it's not necessarily the most ideal, obviously, but if it means that I learn a lesson and I'm able to get something done, then I'll absolutely do it a
Yeah.
hundred times out of 100.
That's
So
exactly what
just
I was
not
talking
having,
about with just
yeah,
figuring it out. Like
yeah.
there's a way out there to get the deal done. It's just putting the pieces together that's going to get it across the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. And just, building your network and building your team around you and making sure that it can get done is the biggest thing that you can do.
Hmm. Um, One thing I want to talk about is, obviously stepping out and going on your own and taking this massive action and taking this massive risk. It comes with like there is a necessary amount of like personal drive and ambition that comes into play with that. And you mentioned earlier that there was a point after at the early stages of your career where you didn't really have that drive. You were playing golf all the time, which, hey, I would love to play golf 3 or 4 times a week, but it's just not realistic at times. But there was that phase of your life, kind of in that transition phase of figuring out what you wanted, where it didn't seem like there was a lot of that ambition at play. Um,
Mhm.
what changed? Like where'd the switch flip?
Yeah, I think really just finding that thing that you love to do again. I really, fell out of love with recruiting. I had a non-compete where I still love recruiting, and maybe one day I will be able to go back and recruit, professionals in the financial services world. But I was kind of forced out of recruiting financial services, and I was being forced to recruit some of that manufacturing again, and just fell out of love with the recruiting. Like, as it's decent money, but recruiting like $25 an hour accountants just doesn't get the conversation going. When I was talking to hedge fund managers who were running billion-dollar books, and like just a different type of conversation. And the real estate kind of allowed me to just like fall in love with the work again, which is what it really was. Like at that point in that transition, I loved playing golf more than I loved recruiting at that point. And it was like
Yeah.
that was just what made me happy. So I think the biggest thing is, and everyone always says like, oh, don't chase your passion, all that stuff. Like especially if you're going to be in the small business world, like you need to find something that you are really passionate about and something
Amen.
that you care about. And like with the real estate, like I said, I had kind of mentioned it earlier, like it's not even necessarily about the money that you can generate. Like what I would tell people is, you invest capital with us. We're able to generate you cash flow back, and we're able to allow you to spend more time with your family. So like you have doctors right now that are basically working paycheck to paycheck. They're working 18, 19-hour shifts a week, and they can invest into some of these real estate deals, get some more passive income, and they can start working 11, 12, 13 shifts a month instead of that 18 or 19. And although that money and that cash flow is great, what that really allows them to do is spend an extra 40 hours a month with their kids or with their families, or go and travel. Like I would love, at the end of this, to be able to just go and travel and spend time with my kids and my wife. And that's really what it's about. Like I really couldn't, as nice as it will be to drive a nice truck and, have a house and that's gorgeous and all that stuff. Like that's really at the end of the day, not what it's about. It's about creating that freedom to be able to spend time with the people that you love most. And that's what real estate is kind of it's going to allow us to do, is really spend that time with our family and friends more so than even the money is worth, you know?
Yeah, and that for me, there's a lot that comes to mind because, like you talked about earlier, be honest about what's not working, and for me, I think the main struggle I have right now is balancing that personal ambition, that drive to like go out and get it right now, because like I feel like I have a lot of self motivation, but it also comes from the people I surround myself with, because a lot of the people I'm around are extremely motivated as well. And what I struggle with the most is balancing the drive to achieve the levels of quote unquote success, however you define success, right now, while prioritizing time with family right now. Because like if there's one thing I never want to sacrifice, it's the memories that Jade and myself and our newborn daughter are going to be creating right now. And the thing is like, I know the life I want to be able to provide for them, like you're talking about down the road. And that's going to take a lot of hard work right now, and like grinding through what needs to be done. While I am very passionate about what I do, it's work I enjoy, but it's also, I know there's the opportunity cost as well. As like, what's the trade-off of working on what I'm passionate about and building that future that comes with sacrificing time with them.
Yeah.
So I like it's this give and take, because like I'm doing it so I can provide a certain life for them that I really want to be able to provide, but that comes with like the upfront cost. So for
And
me,
it's I
go ahead.
I was gonna say I can promise you, like I got in trouble this week. I stayed up, until 9:30 or 10 with a guy. I had a great conversation. We're evaluating a deal in Alabama, and wife texted me like, "You're supposed to watch her an hour ago. Like,
Dude,
what
we've
are we
had
doing
we've had
here?" And
we've had two or three of those same conversations since she's been born. We're 3 weeks and 2 days into this, and we've had
yeah,
multiple conversations already. So it's I think for me, like that's key. Is like it's going to be like figuring out, like being on a consistent communication schedule, and it's going to take intentionality behind our communication to understand where we're at, why we're doing what we're doing. Don't just take even if it's a huge opportunity, let's be intentional with communication, not only with the prospect, but also with our family, because,
yeah.
there's opportunity costs both ways.
And like it's just, once again, it's like, okay, like the carrot at the end of the stick is great, but like you don't want to miss everything along the way because you're
Yeah.
trying to build this life. And like you look up 15 years from now and you're like, oh my God, my daughter's 15 and I don't even really know her that well. And like
Yep.
that's the last thing that I would ever want to happen. So it's really trying to balance that. And as an entrepreneur, like my mom says this, my mom was the wife of an entrepreneur, so kind of grew up around it. My wife tells me all the time, like, the money's great, but I want you is
Mm.
why she married me. She didn't marry me because of the money that we could make down the road. She could go get that from anyone. She married me because she wanted me to be able to raise our children, and really putting that at the focus. And like it was like a huge, in week one of her life, like, oh yeah, I already, messed that one up pretty
Yep.
bad. So how
Same.
do you try to balance a lot of that? And like, I don't think I'll ever be perfect at it. But
I think that's the game with there's no destination. It's always just a continual path to growth.
yeah, I agree. I agree. And just like, try your best. It's like, okay, I just need to shut it down sometimes. I really just need to focus on my family. And if, I can talk to this guy on Saturday or Sunday. Like it's not that big of a deal. The deal's not going anywhere. I know the broker. He's going to tell me, like, even in the real estate space, like there's a call to offer, and that call to offer lasts 2 weeks. So I'm like, even if we get put up against the wall, I'll still have 2 weeks to make it work once they get to that call to offer. So it's not, nothing is this pressing. We're not brain surgeons. I'm not getting called to the surgeon's office to go, operate on someone who's in bad shape. It's like everything can always wait until the next day, and really trying to remind myself of that.
Yeah. Love it. Awesome, man. No, all of that's great insight. I love these conversations. And on the topic of where, communication and letting them know when you'll be present, we're getting to that point in the podcast where I told her I'd be wrapping up. So
Yeah.
let's transition this towards the end here. One question I love to ask at the very end of these is, so why I started Take a Step is because, I saw this deterrence, this fear that kept people from taking action and pursuing their true, God-given purpose, what they felt like their purpose was, because they felt like they were doing what they were supposed to do, quote unquote. So for you, like, in your opinion, why do you think it's so hard for people to pursue a life that's in line with their true purpose and with their passions?
Yeah, I think like just having that fear of like paying the bills is always the biggest thing that people worry about. Like taking a step into entrepreneurship, you're always worried about how you're going to put your food on the table, how you're going to pay that mortgage, and really just, one, if you're going to go take that step, make sure that you either have a nest egg or like, God bless my wife has a phenomenal job and she has a W-2 job and we'll always be able to help out a lot of that. So I kind of have that security blanket, knowing that, if we fall short on income for a month or two, that like the mortgage is still going to get paid. So, I think it's really just that big fear of the cash flow that really, helps or hurts people and hinders them from taking that next step, is the biggest thing. So if you're going to go and take this step, make sure that one, it's something that you can actually generate cash flow from, and then two, make sure it's something that you're passionate about, because sometimes it is going to take a lot of hard work to make sure that you generate it. But if you have a good family and a good support system to lean on, that's the biggest thing. Like even when I'm struggling in entrepreneurship, like I can't necessarily go to my wife and ask her questions because she's never done it. Her parents, were one was a public school teacher, the other has worked a corporate job, but I can go and ask my dad questions. He's not necessarily going to give me money to bail me out of a problem. Like I moved out when I was, 21 years old, or graduated from college, and he said, "Don't ever ask me for another dime again." So like that spigot shut off, but I can go and ask him for help and lean on him for, okay, when you were struggling to, have that work-life balance, what can I do? How can I overcome these things? So the best way to overcome that fear is just really having a good support system, even if it's outside of just having money that people can take. Have, even if it's not someone in your family, go and get a mentor and have someone that can teach you, or someone you can rely on, or just someone you can go talk to. Maybe it's the priest at your church, or, the pastor, or whatever it may be. That if you have a good support system around you, I think that's the biggest way to overcome a lot of those fears, is just having those people that you can lean on, like when times get tough, and they will in this entrepreneur journal, they get really hard. You just have to have people that you can rely on, and having, a great spouse is the best thing that I could ever ask for, that she, takes it on the chin a lot of the times and just knows that it's going to be okay. And like, we're going to get through it. And like having that support system is more than I could ever ask for.
Yeah, that's well said. I appreciate that. Dude, it's a shame that we waited 8-9 years to reconnect, but I'm happy we're able to do that today. And it's like, I think, there's a lot of value that came out of this episode for me personally. I hope you took some away from it as well. And I know, at least for the viewers, there's a lot of great insight and great knowledge that is there for the taking. It's just, how are you going to take action? Not just be inspired by what you hear, but how are you actually going to act on the information you hear and allow that to change your life? So it's been awesome, man.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating and a review on whichever platform you're listening on. If you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll talk to you in the next episode. Peace.